Hey, good evening, everyone. Phil here, doing a kind of impromptu live video. Um, I decided to do this because I just got back from Sicily. I went on this trip with my father, and we were gone for about 12 days. It's a little longer than that if you include the travel to and from there. So it was about 2 weeks, roughly. It was an 11-day trip with a day or so of travel back and forth. So I'm doing this video right now. I didn't really announce it. If you're watching, congratulations, you just happened to find this video. I just want to talk a little bit about my trip to Sicily because it was significant for a number of reasons, and I'm just going to talk about them now. So, couple things. First of all, this was an important trip for me because I don't hide this. I don't have a ton of money as an artist, so my dad was generous enough to pay for the trip for me, and I'd never been overseas before. So, this was a first for me. With that, I had to get a passport. First time getting a passport. It's also the first time that I've spent this much time with my father since I was maybe 12 or 13. And that was definitely, something I was thinking about prior to the trip. I'm happy to report it went very well. We had a great time together, but it was interesting. I won't go into a lot of the reasoning behind why that happened, but what I will tell you is that it was a real I don't have the words for it, so that's what it was. A lot of my thoughts, while I was there was just, let's talk about what we're looking at. Let's not talk about what got us here. Let's talk about what we're seeing in the present. So I was trying to be very mindful of the present and also the future with the rest of the trip, and of course beyond that. So that was super important. Let's see if I can get that glare off. Let's see if I can do that. Maybe that's a little better, perhaps. All right, perhaps. Anyway, so the country itself. And I didn't get to visit Italy proper. We visited Sicily. We went around. This is the country, the island, I should say. We went around, starting at Palermo, and we went around the coast, and we ended up in a small town up in Messina province, and the town was called Galati Mamertino. That is my father's town. It's where he's from. And we spent about 2 nights there, and we slept in the house that his mother, my grandmother, who passed away when I was quite young. I do remember her, but I was young. But this was the house she grew up in, and this was now the house passed on to my father's brother, who is no longer with us, and so now it is belonging to his wife. So my dad's sister-in-law. She's a wonderful woman. We got to meet a lot of people. Got to meet a lot of people he grew up with, which was just incredible. Seeing him see people that he hasn't seen for years, possibly since he was a kid. I think was what was happening there. Some of them I think he saw in between then and now, but it looked like these were childhood friendships that he hasn't reconnected with since he was a kid. And that was just incredible, and I got some amazing pictures. Very happy with that. The country, the land, the people, they are a very hearty people. They are there's a lot of respect for older things, and by that I mean they don't wish to tear it down because they can see the inherent value in relics. But what's interesting about that is while they do appreciate their relics and not destroying them, they also aren't protecting them. And this was kind of seen. I don't want to make any blanket statements, but I would say just as a general impression I got, it wasn't something that the view was we shouldn't touch these things because they are perfect as their own thing that is falling apart, as a ruin. So the problem I have with that is some of these things are falling apart. Particularly some of the paintings I saw, some of the original paintings in these churches. And you have these frames that are coming apart, and the painting is like flapping in the breeze, essentially. Well, I'm not saying we should go in and paint over the paintings, but I don't think it would be detrimental to possibly reframe these things or put them under glass or whatever. I'm not saying we should touch the painting and alter the painting, but they're going to lose these things if they just hang on the wall as is. And then the flip side of that is here in the States, we don't seem to value things that are old, really. We tend to tear things down and build new things, but we also seem to like to keep things kept up. I'm not saying this is true for everywhere in the country, mind you, but that's the general impression. So here we don't have the value of older relics as much. Preservation doesn't seem to be as important. Not that it's not important to anybody, but it's just not as important. And we also don't have a lot of old things to protect because we're not that old of a country. But we do seem to try to keep appearances a little bit better. And over there, it's a lot of trash. There was a woman I met on the tour. We went with a tour group, so it was a lot of people from across the world. A group from Canada, a group from Australia and New Zealand, some folks from New York, even some people from Houston, Texas, and so it was really a nice eclectic group of people. And so one of the women there, she's Italian. She lives in Canada now. Actually, I think it might have been somebody else who told me this. It was somebody else who told me this. It was somebody in my father's town. I'm getting everything all mixed up. Anyways, the point is, a woman who's Italian said to me, in Italian, I had to have it kind of translated for me, but what the rough translation was, Italy is beautiful, but Sicily is very beautiful. Italy is dirty, but Sicily is very dirty. And that was the phrase. And that was very true. I saw a lot of that. It was very humbling to be there and to be around all this culture and to just be immersed in it. My last 2 days there, it was very much an immersion. My dad was there to help translate, but I didn't want to ask him to translate every little thing. I know I did that for a lot of the trips, so I tried to back off a little bit and let him just enjoy himself. And there were a couple times where I separated a little bit and went off on my own, and I didn't have him there. And so I started to have to, acclimate more and rely a little bit on my skills from taking Spanish. But the Spanish didn't help as much as I thought it would. It really was only a mild help. By the end of it, I found myself starting to understand more and more what was being said to me, not necessarily being able to fluently converse back, of course, but I did feel more and more a part of what I was experiencing. Going through the mountains, a lot of these towns are in mountains, they're tiny little villages, and a lot of beautiful landscape, and being there that long, I've never been away from home that long, aside from, going off to college and making that my home, or aside from the summer that I spent working in Orlando. Okay, aside from that, I've never gone on a trip that long. And I started to feel very detached from my life here in Austin. It was a very strange feeling because I didn't feel like I was 100% part of where I was, and I didn't feel like I was 100% part of where I came from. It was an odd feeling. And I know I might be sounding a bit dramatic at some point in this video. I'm a bit of a dramatic person, and I guess that's the Italian in me. I believe in being very passionate about everything, but also knowing when to cut it off so that you don't get depressed or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it was very strange not feeling like I was a part of anything in particular, and I think what led to that feeling was the way this trip was structured. I won't do this style of trip again. I don't plan to, where I go with a predetermined travel agency thing, or where we're on a bus the whole time and someone's leading us around. It was very informative, but the problem was it was information overload, and we almost never spent more than one night in any given place. The problem with that was you're living out of your suitcase, and you're feeling like you're being immersed in a culture for an hour with a local guide, and then you go and you sleep somewhere, and the next morning you're up at the crack of dawn and you're on the bus and you're being told a bunch of new stuff about the place you're going to, and then you get there and you're there for an hour or two and you go to your hotel. And just that pattern, rinse, repeat of that, it was just kind of jarring, and you want to take it all in. And I've always been kind of I've considered myself an amateur photographer, and I've always wanted to explore that more. So before this trip, I purchased myself my very first DSLR. I've wanted one for years, and it's kind of a baby DSLR. It's not like one of those massive things you see at sporting events, but it does have the ability to have lenses interchanged. So my point in telling you all this is I was really focused on giving myself a chance to stretch myself creatively in a way I don't normally do, because I did bring my sketchbook with me, but I only did a little bit of drawing one day, and it was just a little bit of the plant life. That was it. I was almost kind of forcing myself. I didn't really feel called to draw too much, but I felt like I should give myself a little bit of a push, because sometimes that helps. Anyway, so between trying to take photos, trying to take short videos with my phone so it wouldn't fill up all the way, but I wanted to capture what I was seeing so I could make a video series on YouTube when I came back, and then trying to just observe everything through my own eyes without a camera in front of it, and then also through my father's eyes, and to see what he was experiencing. All of those things, trying to be mindful of all those things, be present of all those things. I found myself standing on top of a mountain a number of times. Sorry about that. I was getting a phone call. Just sort of looking at the mountain, the landscape before me when I was standing on top of a mountain, and sort of telling myself, look, absorb. You're only going to be here for... I had to reject another phone call. Telling myself, you're only going to be on this trip for so long. You're only going to be seeing these things for so long. Try to capture it as best you can. And trying to capture something, it's almost like saying, don't think of pink elephants. Like you're trying so hard and you almost can't do it. So between taking the photos, which I knew would capture a moment, taking some video, and then just standing there and trying to let it wash over me, it was a lot. It was a lot. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying this was a lot. This was not a relaxing trip necessarily. There were moments of relaxation, but it wasn't a relaxing trip. I think what I would like to do going forward, and I don't regret this trip at all. I'm just for the record. I have no regrets. Even the stuff that wasn't good. It was all an experience. It was all something that I learned about and learned from. But going forward, I'd like to maybe just backpack somewhere. Ireland, for example. I'd like to just go there, take a week or two, ask people where something of interest is, don't have too much of a plan, hang out with the locals, experience some culture, ask them what I should see, and not do too much touristy stuff. I think I would appreciate that, because one of the days when we were in Catania, the city of Catania, which is beautiful, my dad said, we had some free time and he wanted to meet up with an old friend. So he said, take an hour or 45 minutes to an hour, be careful and try to stick to the main road, but go check out the town. And that was one of the only times that I had to do that the whole trip. And I loved it. It was exciting. It was, I didn't know what to expect. I could have absolutely gotten lost. I almost did a couple times. But I felt like I was experiencing the people and the town, and that was super important to me. The facts that they provided are also important, and they're great, but I felt like, don't spout a bunch of facts to me when I'm in the place. Like, on the bus is one thing, but when you're in the place, I felt like I could have done with less of that. I'm not saying zero of it, but less of it, because then you can have the chance to sort of inhale the town and remember it more, your synapses are connecting with things. That's why I tried to eat a dish that had fish in it when we weren't super hungry, but I got a plate of seafood risotto when we were in the town of Shaka, because that is a town that is bordering the water and they're known for seafood. So right now I remember that. I don't remember everything about the trip at this moment, but I remembered certain things that I connected with. Anyway, there was a lot of animals. I want to switch gears here. There were a lot of animals that were homeless. A lot of cats, a lot of dogs. I've never seen so many stray dogs in my life. Or stray cats in that short of a time span. And it was hard to see that. A lot of them were underfed. I noticed something while I was there, and it seemed to me that the town I would visit, if that town was doing better, if it was a richer looking town, wealthier, then the strays also looked healthier. And I think that's probably related, because the towns that were doing not so great, you had these emaciated looking animals who really wanted nothing to do with people. And the other towns where things were doing pretty okay, they didn't mind people so much, for the most part. It made me want to adopt. I already have 2 cats that are adopted, but it made me wish I could do more. And then I remembered we have plenty of that here in the United States, and really nobody should have that. Not to that degree. There's a lot of things people can do to help animals, especially the ones that are starving. More than once people told me that they're under the impression it's not important to people that live in that country. I can't speak for the entire country of Italy and Sicily. I can't speak for them. But I did hear that a couple times, that it's just not a priority for the people in that culture, which is really sad. And not fair and cruel. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. Maybe someday I can. Maybe I can afford to go on some trips by myself one day, and I can raise some awareness. I don't know. But I do know there's a lot of animals that need help right here in the United States, and if people want to help, there's places they can help right now. They don't have to fly across the world. Something that was really interesting to me was just seeing how much activity there was. And I know that's going to sound ignorant. Of course there's activity. Of course people are living their lives. But we don't think about places we've never been to, right? So I don't think about little towns in the mountains. So when I see a little town in the mountains and I see a lot of things happening there, it struck me as interesting, because I was like, man, at any given point in time, I could be doing something, that I deem important here in the United States, but at that same moment in time, somebody else across the world is doing something too, and it's completely different, but maybe it's also very similar. Just a lot of these kind of nebulous thoughts were coming in and out of my brain. When I visited my dad's hometown, I also learned that there were some buildings that weren't being used, and I'll give these examples now. And this is just, I don't mean to reflect poorly on the town. They gave me a lot of packets of tourism information, and I think people should visit them. But there's something that struck me as odd about it, and I feel like it's worth bringing up. That town, Galati Mamertino, they have castles or remains of a castle. And that's the kind of thing we visited on our tour to the other towns. Now, the tour didn't go to my dad's hometown. That was us just doing our own thing. But these remains, everything was overgrown, and there really wasn't a lot of care taken to the grounds. And if the town isn't doing so great, which it looked like it could use some help, you would think they would realize, hey, tourism is going to be how we get some money, and they would maybe start doing something about it. But they don't. They haven't done anything about it. There's 4 churches in the town. One of them is not being used. The story behind that church is it collapsed in the early 1900s, around 1908, and in the 1950s they rebuilt this church, but they never had enough money to finish the interior. So the facade remains standing and is boarded up. A lot of good that's doing them. On top of that, there's a building that they made what looks to be fairly recently, and it was meant to be a hospice. And again, ran out of money partway through the project. It is just a facade, not used. They even built a outdoor recreation center where there's a swimming pool and basketball court and a couple other things. And it's, from what I understand, fairly modern. Well, it's all overgrown. The water in the pool is green. There's trash everywhere. And somebody had told us that there is a person that is supposed to maintain the grounds, but when he goes there, he just kind of meanders around and walks the property. So I guess what I'm saying is, part of me felt very moved by all this, like I wanted to help. And my brain tends to run off and do stories. I think of things, possibilities, every possibility that you could think of, and it's kind of happening all in one moment. One of the possibilities I was thinking of was, what if I moved here? What if I fell in love with the town and moved here? And what would I do? How could I help? And I was thinking of all the ways I could help, and I was thinking of all the things I could do. And then I thought about it, and I went, there's a whole town of people here, and no one's doing anything. So it's not up to me to help them. They already have a town. They've had it for years. There are abandoned buildings where the parents died and the children moved away, right? It's not my responsibility. And I don't mean to say that to be callous, but I mean the people who live in the town should care about the town they live in. You know what I'm saying? And not that I shouldn't care about it, but I can't save them. Nor should I have to. I think at the most, a good tourist should be able to go and contribute and spend money in a town and be a part of it that way. But beyond that town has to care for itself. That's where they live. So all these things were running through my head. A woman who was 82 passed away while we were there. That was interesting. I didn't see it happen, but we walked past the home and there were people gathering outside. And one of my father's friends knew who she was and stopped in to pay his respects. It was just all that stuff gets you thinking. You think about life, you think about how precious it is, you think about when you're standing up on a top of a mountain, you think about how fragile everything is. You think about how small everything is, and then how big everything is. And then you look at a flock of sheep that walks across the countryside and how oblivious they are to all the things I just explained, and how none of it matters to them, and they're just enjoying life one day at a time, and there's beauty in that as well. So I learned a lot. I loved having the opportunity to go on this trip. I met some wonderful people, both native to the area and also from the tour itself, people that I hope to stay in touch with. I believe I have left the trip a changed person, I believe, to a degree. I almost felt like I was forgetting what it was like to have the life I have, and the importance that it has. But now that I've come back for a few days and I'm getting settled in again, you know, I remember why it has value, and I remember why I love the things that I do. And while I think it is good to sort of separate a little bit, I don't want to feel like I don't belong to something. I don't want to feel like my life doesn't have purpose. And all of these thoughts are where my mind is this week. So I don't know where I'll be going next. Again, hopefully the UK. I don't know when it'll happen because I'm going to have to pay for it myself. And I'm just not at a place where I can do that yet, which is fine for now. But I have very long eyelashes, and sometimes they poke my eye. But this was a wonderful experience. I hope you'll check out the rest of the videos that I've created for... they're all brief, you know. Maybe one day I'll do something more ambitious, but I hope you'll check out the videos chronicling my trip to Sicily in short spurts, of course. And as always, thanks for watching this video. More to come in the future. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful evening. Buonanotte and arrivederci.